Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Unstoppable by Renegade Games. Unstoppable is a 1-2 player roguelike card crafting game. I never really know what to call this type of game. I mean, it feels like the roguelite Slay the Spire type of experience, although technically, at least in the prototype, there hasn't seemed to be unlockable content, so it's roguelite adjacent? I don't know. There's got to be a term for this type of game. In any case though, this, as I said already, is a prototype. All rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But with that, this is a 1-2 player experience. It is in the solo hero series, I think, and we'll get to this more later. I do think it's primarily a solo experience with the ability to play at a 2-player, although I do think that compromises on what the experience is, but we'll get more to that later. The general idea in the game is you're going to go ahead and pick a character. You're also going to go ahead and pick a boss. The boss will define the various cards, the enemy decks you're going to be picking from. There's all this setup instruction on the back of the boss card over here. And then from there, you're going to be going through a sequence of taking turns, trying to defeat the various enemies in your pool in order to draw those enemies into your hand, and then slowly go through your deck where you'll eventually be able to deal damage to the boss and with your deck and upgrade by going through your deck of cards. Effectively, your cards operate both as the good things that you're going to use against the enemies, as well as the bad thing that is going to be attacking you all the time. To that end, every single turn what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and start, and this is all handily printed on your sheet over here. You're going to start with the upkeep phase. You're going to gain 3 action points. 1, 2, 3 action points over there. There are extra action points because you can earn these in different ways, but these are the actions you're going to take. This is your economy along with your actual hand of cards. From there, you're going to go ahead to the draft phase. You're going to draw 3 cards and keep 1 from the core deck of where this marker is. Basically, this marker over here defines how you're going to be building your deck. This is a deck builder. You start your turn by drawing a card, adding it to your deck, where it'll eventually cycle into your discard, and then from there, it can go ahead and continue cycling through your deck. So, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and look where this marker is. You're going to draw 3 cards from the top of this deck. 1, 2, 3. You're going to look at those cards, pick whichever one you think is the best card to go ahead and add to your deck. So for example, I think that Virenos Sympathize is very helpful because it's an ally that will stay in play and I could tap it every round to do 2 damage. I should note right about now that they are aware already of a lot of things, including the text in this game being very, very small. Like I said already, this is a prototype and everything is subject to change, and some things they are already aware of and working on. From there, you're going to go ahead and take this card as well as one of the enemy cards. So you're going to grab an enemy card from this deck, and you effectively have now built a good card and a bad card at the same time, although technically you shouldn't be looking at the bad just yet. That goes into your hand over here, and that means now I have my hand of cards where I can go ahead and start taking actions. Now, one thing to note over here is every single time you go through your deck, you are going to be moving this marker up, which means slowly but surely you're drawing from higher decks. But one of the clever things about this game is this marker actually has 2 parts. During the game, some of the effects on your cards, on the enemies, will let you advance this marker, leaving the other one behind, and this will let you go ahead and upgrade from a higher level. Effectively, if I move this marker up, the next time I go through the draft phase, I can draw cards from this deck, at which point the marker resets. And whenever this marker moves, it moves together with the other marker, effectively giving you a clever system where your default drawing deck is always escalating, but you can also earn the ability to buy cards from a higher powered deck, which is very clever. Past that, once you're done with the draft phase, you're going to go to the main phase. That's where you're going to play cards, exhaust allies, buy upgrades, all of that stuff. Now, you have 3 actions in the game. The actions are going to let you play cards, but then separately, you can also go ahead and gather upgrade cards from this row of cards over here. Basically, I'm going to look at my hand of cards over here, and then maybe I have some currency. Let's go ahead and just pretend I have some currency for the sake of being able to show you this over here. I'm going to look over here and say, you know what? I think I want to go ahead and add, well, this card. This card is actually added to a Virenos. So what I'm going to do is this card says it costs 2, but it costs 2 less if being added to a Virenos card. So I'm going to take this card for free, and this card is going to give me both a good thing on the side over here, as well as telling me the bad thing that will show up on the other side, because the other side is going to show up on an enemy. So you have the information of what good and bad you're adding to your deck. In general in this game, you're always adding good and bad to your deck. You're adding good cards, attaching them to a bad enemy. You're gathering upgrade cards, which will give you a strength, but they're also going to show up against the enemies as a weakness. This will slot into your card over here, and you can see now how this lines up. And we have 2 possible upgrades for every single card in the deck. So we have for every single one of your cards, you have 2 possible upgrade slots, but you need to pay attention to which one you go ahead and add. In fact, right now, to show you this, I'm going to go ahead and add another one. I'm going to add this over here, and then take this and put this on my other upgrade slot. You know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and take the currency. I want the currency. This one over here, does it even have a bad? It doesn't have a bad. It's just all good. Beautiful. So I'm going to add this to my card as well, making sure it goes in there, and now I've just built a better card. This card is always going to be a stronger, better card in my deck, giving me more stuff back as as I go. So we're going to go ahead and have that. Let's go ahead and put these out. And then from there, we're going to go to the, we'll continue with the main phase where we can play cards. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and pay my resource over here. And I'm going to go ahead and play this card. In fact, this card, let's see what we're going to do over here. Let's go ahead and play this card over here. It's going to actually cost me 3 of my action points, unfortunately. So 1, 2, 3, you can see these over here. It's going to cost me all 3 of my action points, but it is a good card because I think this card will help me be able to damage other enemies. So watch what we do over here. We play this card, we generate 2 money. When we focus this card, we can refresh X allies, which doesn't really help me right now, but it can be helpful other times. The refreshing allies are going to be these cards. They're allies. Many cards in the game are going to be one-time use. You play them, and then they go to your discard. Versus allies stay in play until you go through a full cycling, until you go through your deck, at which point you'll discard allies from play and have a bit of a refresh every time you go through the deck, dealing damage to the boss and taking them all out that way. So with this over here, we're going to go ahead and tap this right now, put this in my play area, and I'll deal 2 damage to one of these enemies. This is where if you look at the enemies have certain markers on them. This symbol over here says 1 damage. When defeated, I'll get a credit, and this over here is going to tell you to look at, this is an armor effectively, but it's telling me to look at the boss level to just see how high that armor is. In this case, the boss level currently is starting off at 0, which means this is a 1 strength enemy. This too is a 1 strength enemy. In general, enemies are going to be having a attack value and a defense value, and the combination of their health is the attack and defense. So effectively, this is a 1 attack, 2 defense enemy. If this were, this is a 1 attack, 1 defense enemy because this is 0. Versus if this were, let's say, at 2, then this would be a 1 attack, 3 defense enemy because you add the defense to the attack. Similarly, this Ceres II thief over here has an attack value equal to 1 and an attack value equal to the boss level. Meaning over here in this situation, this guy has a 1 plus 2 for 3, 3. It's going to be a 3 attack, 3 defense enemy. Basically, the enemies power up along with the boss in this game, so all the cards are are adjusted around the boss's strength. Because of that, I'm actually going to take out this enemy, and I actually have to take out this enemy. This enemy has a taunt enemy. That means I have to attack them first. They have 1 defense, 1 attack, and 0 defense over here because the boss has not powered up. So I'm going to tap this, dealing 2 damage to this guy, and then he gets added to my hand. Basically, in the game, your hand is going to consist of the various cards you start with, but every time you kill an enemy, you're going to do whatever beneficial effect is on that enemy, but also add that enemy to your hand, so you need to be mindful of keeping up the economy of taking down enemies as you go. That's basically the cycle of play. You're going to go through the main phase, spending your action points, gathering upgrade cards, doing all of that, and then you get to the threat phase, where you're going to take damage from active threats. Which means right now, I would take 2 damage, 1 from each of these, reducing my health, and you gotta be mindful of that, because that health, while there are ways to upgrade it, there are far more ways to take it down as you play through the game. Once you're done with the threat phase, you're going to go out through the cleanup phase. You're going to discard all played tactics. In my case, I don't have any because I only played an ally. You're going to lose any unspent action points. You kind of use it or lose it. You'll reset your armor to 0. Armor is a commodity that can defend you, but it does go down to 0 at the end of each round. You'll refill the battlefield with active threats. There is a fast enemy here, which does not count against our total, so we're going to place another enemy in play, and then we're going to advance the danger by 1. So we're going to go ahead and move the boss marker up by 1, where it's going to progressively be more threatening. You'll see certain color-coded areas. Those are going to be different areas that the boss skips depending on the level of the boss you're fighting against. So you could power up the boss, and depending on which colors you skip is going to result a more or less difficult experience. You're going to continue that cycle until you eventually go through your deck. When you go through your deck, you're going to actually be adding one of these boss cards to the deck. When you level up, if your deck is empty, you're going to advance both level discs by 1, meaning if this were over here, you would advance both of these so you don't lose anything you spend towards. You're going to discard all tactics and allies, so this ally is going to enter your discard pile. You're going to remove any 1 card from the game, so you get to weed your deck as you go through this. Then you're going to resolve any boss-specific threats over here, and then reshuffle the cards and place them threat side up. Usually the boss effect will have you adding one of the boss cards to the deck, which produces a degree of, escalation in the game, where the boss is progressively attacking you, but also taking out those cards is how you're going to deal damage to the boss. And the boss is going to vary, but this boss over here has 12 damage per player, so in a 1-player game, 12 damage, in a 2-player game, 24, and ultimately your goal is to take down the boss before he takes you down. You have to defeat this boss, deal 12 damage per player to that boss, and that's going to happen exclusively through the boss cards. Again, bosses could be different, but this is Harbinger over here, exclusively through the boss cards is going to be how you deal damage to the boss as those get added to your deck. That's basically the cycle of play. You're going to, every single round, you're going to go ahead and try to power up your deck. You're going to draw new cards, so you always have new cards entering your field. You're going to upgrade cards, and then you're going to try to be mindful of your action points, as well as your hand of cards to try to take down the enemies and gather new cards into your deck so you can go ahead and take down the boss in the most efficient way possible. And with that, let's go ahead and, well, before we dive into the review, let's just say that the base game, or prototype I should say, the prototype has a few things. It has 4 heroes right now. It has 3 decks of enemy cards that are going to be different ones combined with different bosses. There are currently 3 bosses over here, so it's going to be the different variety of experience you have. There's a lot of action cards. You will not see most of these action cards game to game. You won't see most of the upgrade cards game to game. There's a lot of variety to the experience that you're going through over here. And then lastly, I should say one thing as well that I have in the game, but isn't in the actual rules I have, so I'm assuming this is either a crowdfunding bonus of some sort, alternatively an expansion, but there's also this entire deck of kind of a mission you're going to go through, where you can kind of go through a mission, kind of looking at those cards and making choices. Some of the choices are determined by the gameplay, some of the choices are determined by yourself, that will lead you through a sequence of cards. So kind of giving you the feeling I got from it, and again, it's not in my rules, but the feeling I got from it is this gives you a kind of choose your own adventure way of playing the same game, but with an extra level of variety to what you're doing, both in terms of the story and in terms of the mechanic that it gives you. So that's an extra nice little thing, but I haven't actually played with that yet. As far as the review, let's go ahead and start off with ease of play. Overall, I thought the rules were fairly straightforward as far as, a game with this many moving parts, I thought the rules were fairly clear, fairly straightforward. A game can vary drastically depending if you're playing it solo or 2 players. For me, I'd say a solo game is probably coming in at around 45 minutes. I can see that going down to 30 if I got quicker at, just playing the game. I can see it definitely getting a little snappier. Right now, I'm still reading and absorbing and processing, so around the 45. Versus a 2-player game is closer to an hour 15. It kind of just doubles the time, or almost doubles the time, because you're basically just taking down 2 sets of enemies, dealing more damage to the boss. You're kind of playing 2 separate games just at the same time with them. Again, we'll come back to this 2-player game later. Anyway, so that's going to be ease of play. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the general deck building going on in this game. This is a deck building experience. I like building a deck. I like feeling the sense of agency over what goes into my deck. And granted, I tend to be a fan of fixed card deck building, and this is a little bit more akin to rotating marketplace because you're drawing 3 cards and then seeing which one works, but it still feels like there's enough of a sense of agency around how you're constructing your deck that it does feel like you really are making important decisions as to what goes into your deck, what's going to take down the enemies, what combos nicely with the things you've done, when you need a bit more damage, when you need a bit more economy. There really is that sense of agency as you go through it. And the card upgrades further enhance that experience as you get to add up to 2 cards to every single card in your deck, trying to take advantage of various discounts, because again, there are going to be discounts for different cards being added to different cards, and this is just a fun experience to be able to add a bunch of cards, to earn money through killing enemies or playing cards, and then go ahead and use that money on trying to gather more upgrades to add to your deck and make your deck increasingly more powerful. So that card crafting, that deck building just gives you a strong sense of building out your deck and developing your deck to take down the threats of the enemies in your way. You're also going to have upgrading from higher tiers, which I already said is a mechanic I really like. The fact that you can go over here and then slowly boost this to be able to grab like a level 6 card when you're only on round 3, that is an incredibly satisfying experience that does not get old for me. The cards do get more powerful as you get higher, and so choosing a deck that kind of just gives you that pathway towards higher and more powerful cards, it makes me feel like I'm breaking the system. It makes me as a player feel more powerful, which is a fun experience. So I like the fact that they kind of gave you that restriction and then gave you the ways to break it, which just makes me feel clever. It's intended, make no mistake, but it makes me feel powerful as a player to go ahead and do that. And overall, I'd say it's a really satisfying challenge and experience. The enemies are not easy to defeat. Even playing on the most basic level, there really is a degree of trying to figure out how you're going to spend your cards, which enemies to take down, in what sequence to take them down, when you have a choice, because sometimes there are taunt enemies, but there really is a very satisfying sense of challenge as you go through this, as you try to keep your health above that threshold of death while trying to figure out how to just power up, upgrade, and take down the boss as you go. This is a tight game even on the most basic level, and while it is certainly beatable, I've beat it a few times, it's one that you can advance it even further by adjusting the difficulty level of the boss you're fighting against, so it provides a nice starting point of feeling accomplished, and then further ramping it up to feel even more accomplished, or perhaps defeated as you go. I'm also really intrigued by the mission deck. I haven't played through it yet, because again, I don't have rules around it, but I am intrigued by the extra level of story or choice that the mission deck might add to the experience, so so I'm looking forward to playing with this over here. As far as things I don't like in the game, most of them come down to the sense of some of the things that don't feel different enough for me. And there are 3 specific areas here. First of all, the boss, I'd say, the boss in general, they don't feel like they interweave with the game enough, meaning they kind of have their cards that go in the deck. I don't feel the sense of how drastically they enhance the overall gameplay experience. It kind of feels like something that you have to just deal with as your penultimate thing. I guess I would say that when I fight a boss, I almost want to feel like I'm fighting a boss. And in this game, it feels more like a war of attrition. It feels like you're trying to stay alive while slowly pinging the boss, as opposed to having any sort of epic boss battle or a boss that overly enhances the way they infiltrate the game. So I wish there was more there. I also recognize that sometimes those things can be added at the cost of usability, in terms of like, you could shuffle boss cards into every single one of these decks and then the boss is present, or I don't know, there's things you can do, but you also have to balance that around usability. But I do wish the bosses felt more like an actual boss as opposed to something you're just slowly chipping away at throughout the course of the game. I'll say similarly, the heroes didn't feel distinguished enough either. The heroes come with 3 basic cards that change them up as far as how they interact with the game. I wish they had more abilities, more ways that they impacted the overall state. I mentioned Slay the Spire way at the beginning of this review, and like that's a game where when you play a different hero, you're playing with totally different cards, totally different deck. It feels like you're playing a wholly different experience, and I kind of wish that were more present here. Whether that was, unique cards for each hero, whether there's unique upgrades for each hero, and I recognize those things do add maintenance, but right now, I don't know if I care which hero I play as. I've played as different heroes, and I don't care. Yes, they have different cards, but it doesn't make me feel like I'm playing as that character or that character. I wish that was something that were different. And again, I think even something as unique as like, a separate upgrade card for each character combined with regular base game cards could really make a character feel distinguished and different and feel like there's a sense of challenge as to how they play. For right now, it felt like, hey, here's a few bonus cards and now you're playing as a different character. So I wish that were different. And similarly, again, all these in the same vein, the enemy decks as well, I didn't get a strong sense of identity as to why I care which enemy decks I play as. I played against different enemy decks and they're just cards. I didn't get a strong sense of, oh, these guys are going to weave my deck and these guys are going to have strong armor. And that might even be present. It might be something I just didn't notice or really go through it, but I wish there was more of a sense of the types of enemies I was fighting against, as opposed to right now where I mix together a few decks and don't really care who I'm fighting against. The overall game is great, just heroes, bosses, and enemies, I wish they felt more unique as far as how they impacted the overall game experience. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, setup and tear down. I'd say setup itself is actually not bad, but tear down is going to involve you going through your entire deck, pulling out all the cards, putting them into their respective stacks. It definitely, these types of games do have a bit of setup and tear down, and that might not be for you, especially if you like the video game types of these games. There's so many video game experiences that give you this experience without that maintenance, so if that's something you prefer, this game will give you that analog experience of those style of games, but doing so at the cost of some teardown. And also, I'll say that the 2-player for me didn't feel that great. This game has a 1 and a 2-player mode. The 2-player mode to me just felt like a way to say, hey, you can go ahead and experience this game at 2 players. It didn't feel like a good way of experiencing the game, so it felt like an option. You can experience the game at 2 players by playing it separately. So if you really want to play this game at 2 players, you can. For me, I'm just gonna play this solo. It felt like it was designed as a solo game. As far as final thoughts on Unstoppable, I really enjoyed this game. I have things I want to see about the game, make no mistake, but if you've watched my content before, in general, I like that variety, that sense of difference and things like that. I really do wish that the heroes felt, particularly distinguished as I played through the game. But if I ignore some of those things, or I'm not gonna ignore them, but separately from those things, I would say that the overall game experience is incredibly satisfying. The things I want aren't complaints against the game itself, they're things that I want more of to further enhance the experience, but as it was, this is a really solid deck building experience that made me feel powerful and clever as I played through it, made me fight to stay alive as I went through the experience, and overall just is one that I recommend if you are looking for anything in that solo or 2-player range that's going to give you a cooperative, take down the boss in a roguelike style card crafting experience. For me, this is a 4 out of 5. There's some things I want to see more of, but overall, it's already starting off at a very high place. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, I'll recommend Slay the Spire. It's impossible not to compare this to Slay the Spire, both the digital game as well as the tabletop adaptation. So similar vein as far as that card crafting, taking down enemies, trying to play as different characters and deal with all that as you go. And then similarly, if you're looking for that progressive type experience where you're trying to outlast a bunch of enemies and make your way to a boss, I think 20 Strong is a different style game, but will very much give you that same feel of trying to just stay ahead and power yourself up so you can take down the hordes of enemies facing you and eventually take down the boss. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.